Okay, so I wanted to make a video just going through these review problems. The idea of this video is for you to check your work and make sure that you're doing your work correctly. It's not to replace you doing the work. There's a big difference between watching me do math and actually doing the math yourself and getting the answers yourself. So the idea with this video is don't watch it if you haven't done these questions yet. Do the questions first and then watch the videos to look over your answer to make sure you're doing them correct. If there's one question in particular you're stuck on, then watch that part of the video to get help on that one question. But you should definitely be trying to do these on your own first. Okay, so we're trying to get the volume of this cone. So we look at our formula sheet, and our formula sheet says pi r squared h divided by 3. So we're going to do 3.14 times the radius squared, which is 2, times 10, and then divide by 3. And you have to do that exponent first, so I'll show that step. You have to do 2 times itself to get 4, and then multiply all that. Don't forget to divide by 3 and get 41.9, which is closest to that one there. So A would be the correct answer. On the test, we're always going to have some multiple choice. To get full marks on the multiple choice, so this one would be out of 2, you'd get 1 mark for circling the right answer, 1 mark for showing me how you got it. So in this case, showing me those calculations gets you the other mark. If all you do is tell me the answer is A, then you're only getting 1 out of 2. And if all you do is tell me the answer is C, then you'd get none out of 2. If you've done some work and then circled C, you could still get 1 out of 2. So always do the work. And so, for instance, like if you forget to divide by 3, that answer's on here. Like the answer B is what you get if you forget to divide by 3. If you don't square correctly or something like that, I'm sure you get one of these other answers, or maybe if you use the diameter instead of the radius, you get the other answers. Usually the other answers are common mistakes if somebody's forgotten a step, not just random numbers. So they're usually there for a reason. So just because you're getting one of those 4 options doesn't mean you're necessarily correct. So always check over your work, make sure you've got the right formula, you've done all your steps. Okay, trapezoid area is a plus b times h over 2. And remember that a and the b, those are the parallel sides on the trapezoid. So we can do 11 plus 13. Height is the distance between them, so we're going to times that by 7 and then divide by 2. So that's 24 times 7, divide by 2, which should give you 84, which is B. Pythagorean Theorem. So label the longest side C, that's the one across from the right angle. The other two are A and B. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. This is one where we know the 2 short sides. We're trying to find the long side. So 9.6 squared plus 7.4 squared equals C squared. So 9.6 squared is 92.16. 7.4 squared is, ooh, that's fun. Sorry about that. 7.4 squared is 54.76. That's equaling C squared. Add those together because we're trying to find the long side. So you end up adding them. You get 146.9 equals C squared. And here's an example. Look, that number's on my page, but that's not the correct answer. There's no way if these sides are 7 and 9 that the other one's 146. That's because that's not C, that's C squared. So remember, last step of Pythagorean theorem is always do the square root of what you get there. And I get 12.12, so 12.1, it's actually C is the right answer. Okay, So this one's probably an example of multiple choice that might be even worth out of 3 marks because you have to do 2 separate volumes and add them up. So, figure is made out of a square-based prism and a cone. I can see it's a square because it says square and it's got those little ticky marks in the picture. So those ticky marks mean those sides are the same. So the prism is length times width times height, which would be 14 times 14 times 18. Which is 3,528. The cone, pi r squared h over 3. Now for the radius of this cone, you have to see that it's sort of perfectly touching the edges of the square. So it would also be 14 all the way across. So the radius would have to be 7. 7 squared is 49. You have to do that part first. And I get 512.9. And then to get the total, we add those two things up. To get the total space in both figures combined, add the two pieces up. Looks like we're going to get the 4,000 answer, but I'll double check. Yeah, 4,040.8. So that rounds to that one there. So B is the right answer there. Okay, the height of a cylinder is twice its radius. And you just got to pay attention to what this is asking. All it's asking us for is the volume of the sphere. So we can really just ignore that cylinder entirely. All we want is the volume of the sphere. 4 pi r cubed divided by 3. 4 times 3.14 times the radius cubed, which is 9 cubed, and then divide by 3. So remember, this one's cubed, not squared. You got to find your exponent button or type in 9 times 9 times 9, but preferably you can find your exponent button. Should get 729 from that. Do that first. And then 4 times 3.14 times 729, divide by 3. 3,052.08, so 0.1. And it looks like it's closest to this one. So I'm off by more than a little bit there. What's probably happened is the person that made up these answers, some calculators have a pi button, which gives you a lot more decimals than just 3.14. It'll give you 10 digits of pi, so that would get you a slightly different answer if you use the pi button versus just rounding it off to 3.14. I would just expect to use 3.14, but pick the closest answer. Okay, stained glass windows have an irregular shape often. Determine the area and perimeter of this window. Give 1 decimal place. Okay, so for area, remember area is where you want to break it into separate shapes. So we've got the semicircle, a rectangle, and a triangle is one way to do that, or you could view it as a semicircle and a trapezoid and use the trapezoid formula to do both the rectangle and triangle in one go. So totally up to you. So for the semicircle, we're going to do pi r squared and divide by 2. 3.14. The radius will be just that distance, so half of 1.9. Which is 0.95. Square that and divide by 2. So I'm going to do the 0.95 squared first. My calculator says 0.9025. I'm going to multiply that by 3.14. Divide that by 2. And I get 1.42. Let's say if I keep 2 decimal places. 2, it's just a rectangle. That's length times width, which is 1.9 times 0.6, it looks like. 1.14. And 3 is a triangle. It's base times height divided by 2. Now remember, the base and height have to be at 90 degrees from each other. So I can't use the 3.7 because I would need to know that distance there, and I don't. So I'm not using the 3.7. I have to use the two 90 sides on a right triangle as my base and height. So 3.8 times 1.9 divided by 2. I think 3.61. There we go. And then I've run out of room. But we should do the total area, which is 1.42 plus 1.14 plus 3.61. I get 6.17, and I don't really care if you round to 1 or 2 decimal places, it doesn't matter. What I do care about is you put your units on there, so those were meters, this is area, so it's meters squared. Now for perimeter, remember perimeter is just the outside. I'm going to erase all my stuff on the inside there. If I'm walking around this shape, I'm going to walk around the semicircle, and then I'm going to walk down the 0.6 side. And then I'm going to walk along that slant, it's 3.7, and walk straight up this 3.8. Those are the 4 things I'd walk along if I'm walking around the outside. So the only number I don't know is the semicircle. Distance around a circle is pi times diameter. We're only doing half the circle, so pi times diameter divided by 2. If I punch all that in, I get 2.98, we'll say. And then I'll add that to the 0.6, I'll add that to the 3.7, and I'll add a 3.8. And I get a total perimeter of 11.1 if I round it off. Meters is my perimeter. Okay. Area of this figure, the curve is a half circle. So we've got a rectangle here. The rectangle's there. It's 9.3 by 12.7. So that's the rectangle. We also have the semicircle, which is pi r squared divided by 2, so that's the semicircle. This is the rectangle. 3.14, the radius of that semicircle would be half of the 9.3. So 9.3 divided by 2 is 4.65. So I'm going to multiply that by 4.65 squared and divide my whole answer by 2. And remember, you have to do the squared first, and then times by 3.14, and then divide by 2. Which I had up on my screen, and then my calculator turned off. Let me get it back. I get 33.9 for that area. And then we look back at the shape, and it's basically the rectangle with the semicircle cut out of it. So it's smaller than the 118. So our area, we have to do the 118, subtract the circle, and you get 84.21 or close to there, depending on how much you rounded stuff. Okay, moving on to the next one. Cookie dough pails are in cylinders with a diameter of 17.2 is the diameter from end to end, and a height of 12.8. You have a scoop that makes spheres of cookie dough with a diameter of 4.8. How many cookies can you make from this pail? So we need to get the total volume of cookie dough we have, which will be the volume of a cylinder, pi r squared times h, 3.14. The radius of the cylinder is going to be half the 17.2, which is 8.6, and the height of the cylinder is 12.8. So 8.6 squared first, then times by 3.14, then times by 12.8. And we get 2,972.6 centimeters cubed, of cookie dough. So that's our total dough. Each cookie gets scooped into the sphere. So remember the sphere formula, 4 pi r cubed, and divide by 3. So 4 times 3.14 times the radius is going to be 2.4, because half of the 4.8. Have to do that cubing first. 4 times 3.14 times 13.8, we'd say. Divide by 3. I've got, so my cubed up on my screen. Multiply by that. Multiply by the 4. Divide by the 3. Should come up to 57.9 if we pay attention to our rounding there. Centimeters cubed. And the question is, how many balls of dough do you get from that total amount of dough? So in order to figure that out, it's a division thing. Take this, divide by the amount that each cookie uses up. And I get 51.3, which means we can get 51 in a bit cookie, so therefore 51 cookies with a bit left over. We're almost there. So Terry is painting the shaded area of the rectangular wall shown. The average cost of paint is 0.4 cents, 40 cents per square meter. Total cost. So I guess it's got the circular window in the middle of it. So it's kind of similar to the semicircle question. We're going to get the area of the full wall, which is length times width, which is 8 times 20, which is 160 square meters. Get the area of the circle. It's a full circle this time, so no divide by 2. And we're going to have to paint everything except for the window. So subtract that 28.26 out of the 160. So that's the area that needs to be painted. I'm just reading the question carefully because often there's something about painting it with 2 coats, but I don't see that, so. Oh, geez. So we're just going to take the amount. Each square meter that we need to paint costs 40 cents. So take 40 cents and multiply by the amount that we need to paint, and we should get our cost. $52.70 if we round that off. There's our total cost. Okay. A piece of board is leaning against a wall. The board is 2.2. The base, it's 0.7 away from the foot of the wall. How high does the board reach up the wall? So we're trying to find that side. It's a right triangle. We know 2 sides. It's Pythagorean Theorem again, except here's an example where we know the long side and we're trying to find the short side. So a squared plus b squared equals c squared. We don't know a. We don't know one of the short sides. We do know, I labeled it b. You could have labeled it a. It doesn't matter. We know one of the short sides, and we know the longest side is 2.21. So 0.7 squared is 0.49. 2.21 squared is 4.88, we'll say. And then here's the example. What we want, if we add 0.49, we get 0.48 as the answer. So in order to figure out what we want, we actually have to subtract the 0.49. And we get 4.39. And remember, that's not a, that's a squared. So we always do a square root at the end of one of these questions, these Pythagorean Theorem questions. And I get like 2.1. So therefore, it reaches 2.1 meters up the wall. Do a quick check. The 2.21, the length of the board had to be the longest side, and it is. It's a bit longer than the 2.1 that we found. And very last one. Ice cream shop sells scoops that each contain an average of 525 cubic centimeters. So that is the volume of one cone of ice cream. So that's their servings. So the ice cream is served in this tub. So it's very much the same as which one? The cookie dough question, except you don't have to figure out how much each one uses. It tells us the volume of what each cone uses. We just have to figure out the volume of the tub. Pi r squared h 3.14 times radius is going to be 15 because it's 30 all the way across, times 45. 15 squared is 225. $31,792.5 centimeters cubed. That's the total amount of ice cream. Each scoop uses 525. So again, we're going to divide that number by 525. And I get 60.55, which means they'd be able to make 60 with about enough for another half cone left over, but they're able to make 60 full cones of ice cream from that tub. So that's all the review. If you can work through these ones, you'll be able to work through everything on the test, no problem at all. But thought this video might help you figure out some of the ones you can figure out. So I hope it was helpful.